If you want to support the show, you can go to mwpnews.com/support, where you can pick up my latest book, Succession Planning, and all my other books that have previously been released on Kindle for only $2.99 each. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Backlog Files. I am Adam, and we're here to talk about Pokemon Colosseum, an underrated game in the Pokemon franchise that does not get the love it deserves, I don't think. That's not to say it doesn't have a legacy. The Shadow Pokemon that were introduced here did eventually make their way into Pokemon Go fairly recently, within the last 5 years, as part of the Team Rocket add-on, where they have Shadow Pokemon, and let's just get into what that is. Shadow Pokemon were introduced here, and it is the idea that the bad guys turn Pokemon evil, which turn them into super high attack. They do a lot of damage, but they can't take a ton of punishment at the same time. Shadow, if I remember correctly, has a weakness to all types. So inherently, you're a glass cannon. And it's interesting that this is introduced here. I would have been about 10 years old when this game came out, and because this came out in April 2004, March 2004. Oh, right after my birthday, when I turned 10. So this game comes out for GameCube, and let me just say, when you're 10 and trying to find a way to rectify the fact that what you liked when you were younger can now be for what you see as an adult, think of it as, this is if Zack Snyder did Pokemon, is what this game is. You're the bad guy. You've run away from that, and you're going to be this dark, like, anti-hero type. You got this long trench coat. You have a device that lets you steal other trainers' Pokemon, but you only use it for good. It's such a cool idea that I'm surprised that after XD they never went back to this. And I'll say that, like, this is the start of the era that I really love of Pokemon. This is the start of the let's explore the core gameplay expanded out into different gameplay styles with different types of regions, with different types of things like that. Because this is the same time you get Mystery Dungeon. This is the same time you get Ranger. You get all that kind of cool stuff, which is just like, it's Pokemon, and you recognize the Pokemon, but we're using them in different ways. So I really appreciate that about this. This game is also an attempt to... The gameplay mechanics are largely just the gameplay mechanics of the handheld games at the time. You battle... All the battles are double battles. You start with an Espeon and an Umbreon instead of, one of the base starters. And you go through and you have to, liberate all the Shadow Pokemon and defeat the bad guy. There's a pretty big focus on the Johto Pokemon in this, because again, like I said last week, this was an attempt by the Pokemon Company, by Pokemon as an organization, not specifically, that, to bring these Pokemon to next gen, because they were locked into Gen 2 because of hardware limitations of the Game Boy Color. So like, if you wanted to get, and this was before Emerald, if you wanted to get the starters from Johto, if you wanted, Croconaw, if you wanted Totodile or Cyndaquil or Chikorita, this was the way to do it. This was the only way to do it, which is interesting, because this was a way to do it in a unique way and allow you to play a different experience. There are no wild encounters in this, and you don't get the wild encounters until you get to XD, which we'll talk about next week. And I think that for what this game is, it's pretty well executed. And there are also a lot of features that we see eventually folded into other games. Like, instead of it being like separate things like your Pokédex and all of that, it is all combined into one thing. It is all combined into one gadget. I think it wasn't called the Pokégear. The Pokégear was in Ruby and Sapphire. It was called the PDA. Oh, that makes sense. Which is kind of like a mobile phone combined with a Pokédex combined with, other stuff like that. And putting it all in one place, that would eventually get folded in later games. I think now in Scarlet and Violet, it's just Your Pokédex is your, is the same as the map, is the same as other features, all put into one spot, so you don't have to, have multiple menus and all of that. And the ore region is fantastic. Between this and XD, the ore region is just one of the things that it never made the transfer outside of these two games, but it's just so visually unique and different from what we've seen, especially up until that point with Kanto, Johto, Hoenn. It just looks and feels so different, because it's so desert. Um, because so much of the game is tied to the desert, and because you didn't have the routes, and because you didn't have the wild encounters, it felt like a region that was oddly dystopian. Um, so that could be cool. I mean, who knows? Maybe we get to see Ore again in Legends Z-A. I'm not saying we're going to, and I don't think it's likely, but who knows? But I think everything about this game kind of clicked for me at the time, and going back and playing it, a lot of it ages really well. And I think that a lot of that comes from the fact that I think when we look at video games in general, I think Nintendo games tend to age the best visually because Nintendo games look for a style and stick to it. Like, the GameCube era especially looks just as good now when you plug it into your TV, even playing off a GameCube with an upscaler, which I have. Like, I have one of those things you plug into the back of the GameCube and it converts to HDMI. It looks just as good now as I remember it years ago. And I think it's because Nintendo isn't going for hyperrealism, and when you go for hyperrealism, that's where things start to look weird. So the fact that it stands up as much as it does, that's pretty solid. Um, this is also the first time we got the 3D models of Pokemon in kind of the modern sense, because even Stadium 2 didn't have the modern look for a lot of the Pokemon. A lot of it was the what's it called? A lot of it was the same kind of models that were based on 2D art designed for the Game Boy. Now that, at this point we had what it would look like in full color with 32-bit graphics, we were able to see, like, oh, this is what it should look like with some depth and all that. The Pokemon here now match that. And then on top of it, it had Colosseum mode, which allowed you to, connect your games into playing this on the TV. If you wanted to play your Pokemon from Ruby and Sapphire and have them battle against each other, or battle your friend, do it in a 3D environment, this was the way to do it, and it worked very well. And I think I've said it before. I think I talked about this on 30-minute reviews, when I had a listener. I think it was a listener question, or I just talked about it when Netflix said they were getting into the Pokemon business in a big bad way. Like, this is where I would go. Not specifically tell the story of Colosseum and XD. I'm not saying retell those stories exactly. I'm saying that Battle Mountain in this, where you got to battle through 100 to get to Ho-Oh at the end, and that's how you get Ho-Oh. You can put them into your handheld games. That's something where I'm like, oh, fuck. That is, give me don't stick to, like, the turn-based combat rules. Give me the raid style battling to the top of this fucking mountain game. uh like, show where it's like you just are battling to the top of this, and this is how this is the fight against the shadow Pokemon. This would be such a cool idea. Like, and I would love to watch that. There were also some things with the e-reader compatibility, because at the time, for those who don't know, there was a device that you could attach to your Game Boy Advance called an e-reader. We didn't really touch on this with Ruby and Sapphire, because there was really only one purpose for it in Ruby and Sapphire, which was opening up additional rooms in one house in Moss Deep. And I never got a chance to do that, because despite having an e-reader, I never had the cards to do that. I did have the cards to do the match-up game in the e-reader app, um, but I did not do that. The e-reader did give you some battle cards. There were some battle cards you could get, which would allow you to battle various trainers, and that was also how you got some shadow Pokemon that were locked to it. Um, at that point, you get Togepi, you could get Mareep, and you can get Scizor. Um, so that was kind of cool. Um, and I like the e-reader as a concept. I don't think it's that great, but I do like it as a concept. Celebi was in the game. Um, in the Japanese version, you catch Celebi, which is kind of cool. this game is very much worth the time to go back into, I think. Um, Especially if you haven't played it before. What else do I want to talk about? Purifying the shadow Pokemon was kind of cool. You had to like get the bar down. If you like, every once in a while, your Pokemon would go into like a hyper state, and when that happened, you would, you know, you could call like you the for me as someone who was trying to get them out faster, they'd go hyper, and then you call them to get them out of the hyper state, and that would cut out almost a quarter of the bar immediately. Um, and then once the bar is empty, you go over to what was the name of the town? Um, Azure Town or something like that. Like, no, it's what the fuck was the name of the town? Um, Azure Town, a Ghetto Town, a Ghetto Town. It was something. It's something with an A. You go over there, and there's like a shrine to Celebi. And when you go in there, you could Celebi will come down once you get it down to to nothing. Celebi would purify your Pokemon. And the key to that is if your Shadow Pokemon remains Shadow, you don't have all the moves that it can possibly learn, and you're locked into not having them. Like they can't get any experience while they're shadowed. You have to unshadow them to be able to teach to give them experience and have them level up. So there are key benefits to that you do need to do that that are worth doing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know why this game hasn't been ported yet. I think that like in a world where we're porting like Luigi's Mansion and we got a director's cut remake of Blue Rescue Team, and that's not to say like when we get to Blue Rescue Team, we will talk about it. That is in the conversation, and it may be in the top 10 games of all time that we talk about later in the year on 30-minute reviews. Um, I I think that this is maybe not as big a game as that, but I certainly think it warrants a look back in a way that like Snap has gotten, in a way that, you know, what was it? In a way that what was the other game? In a way that in the way that Mystery Dungeon got to look back. Like, this is a series that deserves like do an HD remake. I mean, look, we guys paid $35 for Pokemon for Star Wars Battlefront and Star Wars Battlefront 2, which is, upscaled with online capability. Like if you do the same thing, like people would buy that. Like for $39.99, people would buy the 2 pack of the 2 games. Like I'd buy it. And that's the thing too, it's that it's like a lot of these games that we're gonna be getting into this region of, they're all so good and they're all so fun. But if you want to go and play it now, you either have to do something you shouldn't, which I'm gonna say, maybe not entirely meaning it, which is pirate them, or you have to go to a local game store, which is where I do. I have a local game store that I go to, and you got to pay like an arm and a leg to get a physical copy of it. Um, because I think if you're gonna get Pokemon Colosseum now, you're gonna pay like $150, which is a lot of money for a game on a console that hasn't been supported in 15 years almost. Like, it's a lot. Um, But I digress. Pokemon Colosseum is definitely worth a play if you've never played it before. Let's take a look at our ranking and see where we would put it. Backlog files ranking page. Okay. So let's look at our list. So number 14, Hey You Pikachu. Number 13, Pokemon Pinball. Number 12, Pokemon Puzzle League / Pokemon Puzzle Challenge. Number 11, the trading card game. Number 10, Red and Blue. Number 9, Stadium. Number 8, Stadium 2. Number 7, Pokemon Snap. Number 6, Pokemon Yellow. Number 5, Pokemon Gold. Number 4, Pokemon Crystal. Number 3, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. Number 2, Ruby and Sapphire. Number 1, Emerald. This is a tough one. Inherently, this is better than Stadium and Stadium 2, so that immediately puts it into the top half. Now, what mainline games is it better than? Is the question. Because inherently, like, it's better than Snap. Even though I think it has less replayability than Snap, I think this is a game that is more enjoyable than Snap. Because Snap is only replayable because it's so short. This game is fun, and it feels like a first attempt at doing Pokemon in a 3D environment in a way that it hadn't before. So I would say it's better than Snap. Is it better than Yellow? I would also say yes, it's better than yellow. Is it better than gold? You know what? I'm gonna put this above Fire Red and Leaf Green at number three, at our new number three. Um, Colosseum is the new number three. Um, because I think that, if you put in front of me a copy of Fire Red, a copy of Colosseum, a copy of Ruby, and a copy of Emerald, I would pick and said, which one of these would you want to play the least? I would say Fire Red would be the one that I want to play the least out of that batch. Out of the next three, Colosseum would be the one that I want to play the least. I could jump back into Hoenn in any form and want to jump right back in. Um, I also recall some of the like gameplay in it, and some of the puzzles are a little tedious in Colosseum in a way that they aren't in Ruby and Sapphire. Um, so that's why I'll put it at number three, our new number three. Which brings us to where we are next week. Next week, we have Pokemon XD. Then we get into a bunch of fun ones. A lot of really fun ones. We got Pinball Ruby and Sapphire, which is another one that I love. Um, we got Trozy. We got Channel, Mystery Dungeon, Ranger, Dash, which I've never actually played Dash, so this will be an experience because I'll be playing Dash for the first time and talking about it. But we'll wrap up there for today. We'll be back next week with Pokemon. Hang on, what was it? Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, the sequel. And until then, have a great rest of your week.